Good morning, everyone. This is Saturday, May 28th, 2016. We welcome you all to our Bible study, and our moderator today is Mike from New York.
Thank you very much. And again, I really am very grateful for the Bible lesson with Stellar and all the help that everybody provides. So the statement this morning by Mary Bakeretti was from the Divinity Course in General Collectania, Blue Book. I live with the Bible. I have not another thing on earth to be one with but the Bible and science and health. I, the Bible, and science and health, Trinity, 3 in 1.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
So the topic today is the wisdom of the donkey. And I have to thank Linda for that one. That was beautiful. Okay, the first question. At what point of their journey out of bondage were the children of Israel?
I got the feeling that it was toward the end of their journey, because they were camped over by Jordan and Jericho.
It was most definitely that. The close of the 40 years of wandering, shortly before the death of Moses, they were about to cross over the Jordan. Evidently, they scared the, you-know-what out of the king who saw them all. I guess there were millions of them. There were a lot of them anyway. Anybody else on that?
Thank you very much. I think that pretty much sums it up. Any other?
Yeah, it's an important point of the story I found. I didn't know that. I've read the story isolated, but I didn't know all this other information.
I had read that Moabites were descendants of Lot, and so that the same problem that Lot had was not feeling like there was enough and needing to separate, and they were still feeling, because they weren't being threatened for their lives, they were feeling more of their resources were being threatened.
Eating the grass or whatever it
Yeah,
said.
eating the grass.
Yeah, and in those days, that was kind of one and the same. You didn't have enough food, you could starve. And it happens often. We don't think about it today because there's plenty of food for everybody today. But in those days, there wasn't.
Well, plenty of food for some, not for all.
So there's plenty of food. It's a matter of
Distribution.
getting it to the front. So this was right at the beginning of their journey into the Promised Land, where they were going to have to deal with a whole lot of other people. And they had pretty clear instructions, didn't they?
Yeah, Joshua from God gave them very clear instructions.
You were pretty fearful of the people of Moab. Even the description of the children of Israel, covering the face of the earth. No doubt that there was a lot of them, but covering the face of the earth sounds like a bit of an exaggeration, which is something that fear will do to one. Of course, fear will cloud your judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
I think one thing that surprised me, which is very silly, was how the news had traveled ahead of the children of Israel, how they'd come out of Egypt, et cetera, and the parting of the Red Sea. So there was plus they'd already defeated a couple of tribes, and so there was a lot of fear from the native people to they looked at as an invading force, obviously.
One of
Oh.
the... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the tribes, one of the ones that they did defeat was, I don't know how you say it, Sihon, king of the Amorites. And that king had taken part of their land, of the Moabites. And so it really didn't, it wasn't based on really good thinking that now they would be fearful of the Israelites. They were kind of just putting their fear upon them instead of really basing it on fact.
Yeah, isn't that how the human mind works? It imputes its own motives to other people, sort of creates its own fear.
Right. You see in others what you might be harboring yourself.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, it'll come back on you. What thou seest, that thou beest.
And
My
that's-
grandmother used to say that, but I think it's Plato.
But that's a well understood phenomenon among psychologists. But it represents the stupidity of the human mind. It's incapable of thinking anything other than what it's already been trained to think. In other words, it can't think outside the box or listen to God. Okay, so we got the timeline.
Well, maybe a couple other things, you know. So
Go ahead, Tom.
of course. So it's fun. So you know they were in the land of Moab, which you know that's where David's grandmother came from, right, Ruth?
Right.
Right.
And this is also where the Israelites encamped before they crossed the River Jordan. They were in the land of Moab, and it's also where you know Moses climbed up on Mount Nebo to see the Promised Land, because he wasn't able to go over. He wasn't going to be able to cross the River Jordan to the Promised Land, you know.
Interesting. Thank you.
So he got his telescope out just to see what it would look like, huh?
And, you know, there is a little confusion on this, but they were also in the same area because, you know, when on Numbers 23 talks about climbing up to the top of Mount Pisgah, where they built some altars. So a little confusion between Mount Pisgah and Mount Nebo. But whether they're the same mountain or they're probably in the same general area. Could be two different mountains, you know. But Mount Nebo is where Moses climbed up to see the Promised Land, and Pisgah is also mentioned in terms of Moses, and also in Numbers 23 about where Balak built these altars.
Okay, thank you.
And we know where Moab comes from, right? I forget which one, but anyway, it's one of the descendants of Lot.
Right.
Right.
Distant cousins. Very distant cousins.
Okay, that gives us a perspective. Anything else? Is someone else trying to speak?
No, I just put myself on mute and off on mute just to make sure. So that might have been me.
Oh, okay.
That's very, very well covered. Thank you very much. So, who was Balaam, and what, if any, connection did he have with Baal or Baalim?
I read in William Henry that Balaam was a wicked prophet in the Bible, but noteworthy because even though he was wicked, he was not a false prophet. That he did hear from God, and God did give him some true prophecies to speak. Even though his end was in the end he betrayed Israel and misled them.
Thank you.
Well, one of the things that was said about Balaam was that he had a gift of speaking fluently. He had a reputation of those he blessed would get the blessings, and those he cursed would get the cursing. And the presumption is relating to his ability to come out with fluent and descriptive language very well. But you got to remember, he was just a man. What came out of his mouth was governed largely by what was influencing him. And when God spoke to him and he finally listened, then good things came out of his mouth. He has a history of going the other side too, depending on how he was influenced.
I read that he started out as a good prophet, or they assumed that he did, but then he became prideful and covetous. It kind of made him go in the other direction.
So what do you think that was? What was the source of his wickedness?
Not understanding the true God.
Such a better human mind.
Thinking that he had power apart from God.
Self-will.
Yes. All of those things, but certainly
all of those things. Maybe materialism. Yeah, I mean, we've seen it before, haven't we? Someone starts out as a really good prophet, a really good healer, and then they start getting a little big for their britches. They think it's them. And if there's any materialism that hasn't been burned out, it would affect their judgment, wouldn't it?
Well, and in his case, he was, desiring, and that is materialism, what the king was going to offer him, reputation and money and other things if he would help him. And so he wanted to use his God-given talents to succeed in a human material way, which is very, very dangerous and also stupid. And that you definitely see happen. A person will have a talent, and instead of using it for the glory of God and using it for his purposes, they end up using it in other ways just to achieve fame or money or fortune or whatever, power, and they are selling their soul to the devil. I read about him that he was an oddball among the prophets, and he wasn't an Israelite, but a Syrian. And his name means the devourer of people. I wondered about the naming of these people. It must come afterwards. I mean, I can imagine a mother naming their child something that means that. So these names must have gotten their meaning, yes, afterwards, I think. I don't know. But
His father's name, I think, meant to consume, but I'm not sure.
No, that's right. I read it meant fire.
The other word that comes to mind for Balaam is duplicitous, in the sense of that he wasn't straightforward with the people who were asking him for help, even though he knew he couldn't curse the Israelites. He wasn't very straightforward at all.
Absolutely. No, he was. He was cunning, full of guile, deceitful, saying one thing to your face, but inwardly having other designs, the hidden agenda. I read, too, that in 1967, in Jordan somewhere, they found an ancient text, and it tells about the activities of a prophet named Balaam of Beor. And so they feel they have definite proof he existed, because this was way back in the time of, I think, King Uzziah, there was some kind of an earthquake, and anyway, they found it among the ruins.
To give you an indication of the duplicitous nature, has been contested as to whether or not the Balaam in Numbers 22 to 24 was the same Balaam in the Numbers 31, where he did so much evil. And a lot of people think, oh, it's got to be two different people. But that's because they didn't understand people, people are who they are depending on what's influencing them, whether it's the human mind or the divine mind. And somebody as unstable as Baal could have gone both directions easily.
And, Balaam got a very, very bad review in Revelation to the church of Pergamos, where I know thy works and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. And thou holdest fast my name and hast not denied my faith, even in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth. But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel. So I guess we'll get into that part later, but generally speaking, he was not remembered as being in any way a good prophet, but a wicked one, as we started off with.
The irony is that's how I perceived him the first time I read the sections in Numbers. I thought, well, this guy really was good, but then when I started seeing those other areas in the lesson too, it was like, I have to revisit that. And then going through the process of the questions, Tom threw out a couple of little items that made me really look at it again and really opened up my eyes further.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, anyone else on that question? Did we cover connection that he had with Baal?
Well, what I wanted to say with Baal was that Baal was the god of, it was the male version of the god of those other non-Jewish people. And when I looked up what the meaning of that was, it was actually archer. I found that very fascinating because those were the snipers of old. And so that really relates to things like in Psalm 91, where they talk about the arrow that flieth and that kind of thing. So it's things that sneak in and take you unawares. And,
oh, that's great. Thank you. I like that, the sniper.
Right. And that's why I threw that in there. It was mostly for people who don't know the difference, because at first I thought that the prophet that we're talking about was the same as the religion and the deity, and it took me a while to figure out that the two A's are after the L instead of before the L, and it's so important to know what each aspect of this is to make the story really make sense, which obviously I never did in the past. So any more on number 2, or shall we move on?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Mike brought out something really, really interesting is with all the optional reading. You think about it, Balaam's mentioned throughout the Bible. So, and I think one way to sort of illustrate kind of the significance of this is if we go to Joseph and where the Pharaoh had a dream, and then he wanted the dream to be interpreted, so he asked for magicians and wise men, And in other cases, we go to Daniel, and Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he asked for magicians and astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, So like in both these cases, the kings are asking for someone's help, but they're not referring to him by name. But in the case of Balaam, he is referred to as a specific individual,
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then he's mentioned throughout the Bible. And then I think, Mary, what you brought up about the archaeological evidence that they found that there was some text that was written about Balaam, you know, giving evidence that he actually existed, you know.
So he did have spiritual sense, but he lived in Syria as a Syrian amongst all those people who worshipped Baal.
Well, I think one way to look at it is this is pretty significant that King Balak asked for his help. You know, so if I were the Israelites, I think I would have been pretty darn scared, you know. It was something significant, you know.
But did they even know?
Yeah, I don't
Going
know.
along with
They seem to know a lot of things, and even without cell phones.
But that just puts in perspective, you know, that someone who was so well known for his abilities as to how unsuccessful he was in using his abilities against the Israelites. It wasn't just a nobody.
Right, and it was because he was, as someone said, it was duplicitness.
So I think that helps us in our current, you know, daily life. You know, if we think something seems to be sort of too overwhelming for us, or too powerful, or we don't, you know what I mean? Like we feel like we're small individuals and there's nothing that we can do about it. You know.
Well, right, because the Israelites were under the protection of the one God.
And God did not want them cursed. You do not curse those that I have blessed. You know, there's in Psalms there's something, do mine anointed no harm. And, you know, you can know that for yourself. We were given that years ago when we went through the law case. Do mine anointed no harm, because we felt we were following God to the best of our ability. So anyone who would try to curse us or to put a stumbling block before us, God wouldn't allow it. And you have to know that for yourself. That's where you get a more of a fearless sense. Do mine anointed no harm. And as long as you are loving in all your ways, but also very principled, and you are obeying God to the best of your ability, there shall nothing come before thee that can trip you up. The 91st Psalm, that's what I tell all the people that I work with to memorize and use often. Nothing can come before you to harm you. And although Balak tried and wanted Balaam to team up with him, they couldn't. Was powerless before that truth. At least in the beginning, until they started sinning, and then that was a different story. Okay.
Well, one of my favorite parts is when Balak gets so frustrated. So I keep telling you to curse, and every time you just keep blessing him. That's so funny. You did it again. You blessed him again. I asked you a curse, and you blessed him.
Yeah.
That's what reminds me a little bit of Martha Wilcoxon. I don't remember what she talked about, that you reverse the curse to a blessing that turns around back in that. You read that in Prayers and Watches and Arguments too. The idea that what comes to you as a curse really destroys it, and it becomes a blessing to you.
Yes.
So how many times did Balaam bless the Israelites?
The 3?
Yeah.
And I think on each time they went up to another mountaintop
Yeah.
to look at them.
I think there were 7 things that I don't remember the word I'm thinking of. Sacrifice? Sacrifice, yeah.
Yeah.
But 3 blessings.
But
that told me that no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't do it. I mean, it didn't show it just once. He tried to curse, and therefore he blessed him instead of cursing him. To really get that message through, it happened 3 times. So we should really be clear on that message,
Yes.
I thought it was significant that every time they went to the mountaintop, in other words, if we go to the mountaintop of spirituality, evil cannot have its way.
Good, thank you. That's right. When you're in that holy state of thought, life, truth, and love are a law of annihilation against everything unlike themselves. You're in that holy state, and the error cannot approach you. It will. That's exactly what was happening. The Israelites, that error could not approach them. The cursing.
The other beautiful thing about it was that evil could not organize itself. The two of them couldn't get together to do wrong. Can't happen. Evil cannot organize.
Why is that?
So many individual personalities and thoughts that they can't.
Thank you. Thank you. They know nothing of the one mind. That's exactly right. They're in the human mind. There's so many, and they're all just arguing amongst themselves. All error can do is destroy itself, and sometimes the best thing we can do is get out of the way and let that happen.
Another reason is it's not based on principle. In other words, it doesn't have a basis on which to operate from, a stable basis. Therefore, it has to fall apart.
Yes.
Melt away into its native nothingness, so to speak.
It has no power. It's powerless because it's not of God. And you can know that when you see evil seeming to try to organize. We can know that about ISIS. How could it have power if it's not of God? It can't. We give it the power by, watching it and believing it. But defang it. It has no power if it's not of God, and all it can do is destroy itself. Evil cannot organize. Thank you.
One thing I did want to say about attraction to Balaam was that happens today too, because how many times does a ball player or actor or TV personality run for public office, and that's what everybody votes for? They just happen to know who it was, and they liked him or whatever, and it has nothing to do whether they know anything about governing or not. Anything else on that subject of Balaam, Baal, and Baalim? Well, then let's move on to question number 3. Who was Balak, and what were his motives behind seeking Balaam's help?
So Balak was the king of Moab, and the Moabites were resolved to ruin Israel because they thought Israel felt the same, like we kind of mentioned before, kind of put the same motives on them. And Matthew Henry said, the wicked were in great fear where no fear was.
Fear is the basis of really just about every error there is. It's always based on fear. That's why wars get started. Fear. So that's why we as individuals must conquer it within ourselves. And no, it's not the truth. As Christian scientists, you have to ask yourself, what are you afraid of and why? And then get to it. Destroy it, because if you are knowing the all-presence and the all-power of God, there is nothing to fear unless you are sinning, and then you should be darn afraid. If you're not sinning, there's nothing to fear. So, never let it bully you. You have a right to face it and destroy it. Error is a coward before truth, Mrs. Eddy says. If you don't, it will just follow you around until you finally do. what does it say in the lesson? It says, every mortal must overcome their belief in evil. I think that's a quote or close to it. We all have to. Sooner or later, you've got to know that it has no power.
One of the things that I read on in researching a previous lesson was that the Romans, when they built their huge empire, they were very brutal, but one of the things that they did very well was that they integrated the conquered people into the wealth of the Roman Empire to a certain degree, to integrate them and make them part owners of the empire, so to speak, so they would be more compliant. And what I see here is that Balak, by the looks of it, never tried to get to know what the Israelites were about, what they believed in, what their goals were. Just threw up the material thing and based everything off of that fear.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he was deathly afraid because he heard what they had done to the Amorites. And yet, never occurred to him that maybe the Amorites deserved what they got, and that the Israelites were the good guys. He related to the Amorites, which was not a good place to be mentally.
And that quote from Signs and Health I was thinking of is exactly this. Every mortal must learn that there is neither power nor reality in evil. So, you ask yourself, what am I giving power to or reality to? Because you have to learn that it has no reality and no power. And if you do that, you can walk this earth serenely, not, running around like a chicken with their head cut off because you're so afraid of what's going to pop out at you.
And the problem with the Amorites was that in all those religions there was a lot of sacrifice. Sex was a big part of the religions, and as I read in one thing, I don't even know what site I got to, but pagan religions were popular because by going to church you were going to bed. And so that whole mixture made it very, very appealing to the material senses. And then with all the sacrificing and the eating of the sacrificed things and et cetera, that's been discussed on other Bible studies. So, is there any more on that, or shall we move on? Okay, so number 4, how did Balaam respond?
Well, he liked the money, didn't he?
He really, really, really wanted to curse them, but he knew he couldn't. He had that much sense, because he knew enough he couldn't curse what God had blessed. But he really wanted to, only for selfish gain. This is how bribery gets going. People do things if they're paid for it. Do things against their conscience, things that aren't right. It's a very, very wicked form of animal magnetism, and one to be guarded against.
What concerned me was that I didn't pick that up right away. And I thought, okay, what else is going on around me that looks like they're telling the truth, but they're not really. So it really woke me up.
That's great.
That's good.
And that's exactly how it should be applied. And that's what made him a wicked prophet, because all the other prophets, it was in their heart to do what God told them to do. They knew why. They couldn't be bribed. Look at the story of Naaman and Elisha. You know, here he could have gotten all this money, and he wouldn't accept it. He could not be bribed. The man of integrity that I wrote about on the forum, and that Mrs. Eddy has in miscellaneous writings, it's a passages you should all know and know well and aspire to be the man of integrity. You know, he could not be bribed. He could not want to do what God was telling him not to do. Because that in itself, that's the bad motive. That's what Jesus talks about. What are your motives? So even though he surfacely obeyed God, underneath, there wasn't that obedience.
Mrs. Eddy talked about that with some of her students. I'm sorry. Mrs. Eddy talked about that with some of her students, too, that she knew that she didn't push what she wanted because she could tell they weren't being really obedient, because it wasn't in their heart.
Thank you. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
You can't push someone to do something that they, in their heart, don't really believe in, because they'll screw it up anyway.
They will, and it'll blow up. But you can certainly, if God tells you, you know, tell the foe an ambush, you tell them what you foresee and what you think is happening. But then you have to leave it to God. If you force that obedience, eventually it will blow up. And Mrs. Eddy says that in Science and Health. You have to do right because it is right, and for no other reason. And that's because you love God. You love right. In doing that, there's no gray zones like we talked about last week.
I mean, isn't this kind of like what Jesus' 40 days in the wilderness being tempted was all about? I mean, he had these same temptations, didn't he? Fall down and worship me. I'll give you the whole world. I'll give you anything you want. His answer was for us all.
You know, none of us should ever be tempted by bribery. Corrupt government. Benjamin talks about in his country, Nigeria, you can bribe the police.
They expect it.
Yeah, they expect it. How much will you give me if whatever?
Our daughter-in-law grew up in Russia. Same thing. Commonplace. That's how the police earn their income. They don't get paid well, they get bribed.
There's no moral structure, no truth, no Christ truth, no Christ Christianity. This is laying the groundwork for tomorrow. We're really going to get into more of this tomorrow, the round table. It's all highly important. The workings of animal magnetism, and it's going on right now. This topic is not some old thing that happened in the Bible, ancient and modern necromancy. It is going on now, big time. And our eyes must be so wide open to it. So if and what happens usually, if you've done something wrong, then someone will try to bribe you. You've done something wrong. What do? Admit it, repent, get it out. Don't try to hide it, whatever it is. And if you're ashamed of it, well, too bad. You don't want to live under that bribery. Get it out and get it over with, for heaven's sakes. And mainly, repent of it. But don't be lured by money, fame, fortune. It won't work. It might work for a few days or a few months or a few years, but eventually it will blow up really badly.
Well, it can happen right in your own home, too. It doesn't even have to, like you said, fame and fortune, but really, I mean, in your own home, you know, there's the fears of losing your family members or pressure. That's, I mean, like a form of bribery. We'll be nice if you do what we want.
Right. Well, that's a very good example.
Emotional extortion.
Yeah, it's perfect. That's very perfect. That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so what do you do with emotional extortion?
You tell me.
Well, you can live with it for 10 years and then it all falls apart.
Then it all falls apart.
Well, yes, Jeremy, yes.
Yeah, I've been through that. I thought I was being, you know, a loyal husband, thought I was doing right by everybody, and it just didn't matter in the end. I didn't do right away.
Yes, you have to start. You have to dig your heels in day by day. If you've been living that way, it takes a while to turn the ship around. But you start each moment, and if it's not right, you stand by principle and you don't allow it. First, the other family members or whoever it is, your boss, might be shocked, but it's a process you have to do. Otherwise, it'll blow up in worse forms. It's not principled.
And how does it blow up? Because if it's not principled, pretty soon it leads to aggravation, annoyance, hatred. And
or more misconduct, because
misconduct, and if you internalize all that stuff,
you get disease, suffer.
Your body
will respond to it. Mentally, you will respond. You lose yourself. You lose your health. You just, and you know what Linda said, it goes on in a lot of homes. It goes on in a lot of businesses. It goes on in a lot of churches. And if you go along with it, you end up standing for nothing and accomplishing very little, if anything.
And what happened with you, Jeremy?
The end result?
Yes.
Well, everything just kept getting chipped away. You know, my feeling of usefulness with my job left, to the feeling of being a good parent left, the feeling of that I was, you know, that the loyalty to people just all got chipped away until I felt I had no place here at all. And it came very close, but God, I reached out to God at the last moment, and He grabbed onto me, and I'm very grateful for that every day. I always think of the plan and purpose. She talks about the dark, impenetrable cloud of error, and I always try to keep that as dark as possible. If I turn back even a little bit, I see it. So.
Thank you. Absolutely. That's how it works. So as hard as it might be, and you know, remember, with God on your side, if God be for you, who can be against you? That has to be your attitude. You can't go in it like a timid little thing. If God be for you, who can be against you? I don't care who it is and in what way they're threatening you or whatever. Error is a coward before truth. If you go after it in a human way, well, yeah, that's not good. But knowing that if God be for you, who can be against you, then go get him. I remember once someone telling me, I think I read it in Norman Vincent Peale. He says, line up all your enemies in front of you. Get them all out there, just like the Israelites scared Balak. And say, okay, if God be for me, who can be against me? Then you get on your horse and you just say, charge. And you'll be surprised what happens if you do it with God with you, because it's all not the truth anyway. It's a big, huge mesmerism that's built up in your thought, and the dominion is within you. So change thought, and you will change your experience. God can do the impossible, and He can lift you out of the worst situation. I know it as a fact, because He's done it for me. You just stay bound in it thinking there's nothing you can do. Well, there's plenty you can do. That's not the truth. That's not Christian Science. So,
if you line up your enemy, this is what I think. If you line up your enemy, it just looks like you anyway.
that's it, and that goes back to the readings, which Gary read from. Your enemies, love your enemies, and Mrs. Eddy pretty much says that. Your only real enemy is yourself and your belief that there is evil. That is why that quote, every mortal must learn that there is neither power nor reality in evil. So you look at whatever it is that's scaring you, a person, place, or thing, and understand that. It has no evil. You've been afraid of it for some wrong reason. Defang it. And get out. Toxic relationships. You get out of them. If you can't heal it, you get out of it. God, and if you need to, God will provide that way. But you don't go on and on and on. I mean, if it's unhealable and some things appear to be at a time, then get the heck out of Dodge.
If people would do that, we wouldn't have a drug problem in this country. Why do people drug themselves? Because they're stuck. They think they're stuck in these situations that only God has the answer for, and they haven't found God. But that's why, if you're in a tough situation somewhere, there's this term, put it all on the altar. Mrs. Eddy says, right is radical. You want your life to be right, you got to be radical.
Yeah,
so
conservative.
Conservatism.
Yes, conservatism. Yes, it's not acceptable, inadmissible. Thank you. It's on the tip of my tongue. Mild methods don't work. People have tried. I tried. Oh, man, did I try with those mild methods. I really didn't want to take any kind of a stand. Went on and on and on and on. And that's what was so refreshing about Mrs. Evans. She knew that, and she did not use mild methods. I had that situation when I came. I just wanted to be nice and really to please people. If something was wrong and I felt bad about it, I'd say, well, I'd rather feel bad about it than make somebody else. And when I came here and I met Mrs. Evans, she helped me because what I turned into was a doormat. And Aaron just walked all over me. And as we worked, I got a backbone and stood up to the error. And the error left my experience. And I was blessed. The person hung on to the error and wasn't, blessed, but I was blessed. And it freed me from this type of thinking that I had to be nice. And that's the only way you can do it. You have to put God first. And if what God directs you to do, you have to do. And no one respects a doormat. So when they start treating you that way, then they lose your respect, and then they are doing all kinds of things they shouldn't be doing. And you have to respect yourself first. And you say, there's a line here, and you do not cross it. You do not. And if you do, you are in trouble. And believe it or not, that works.
Actually, that's important to do, because for those that acquiesce, it's like an open door for people to come and step on you. Now, that's not a good temptation to leave in front of other people. It's not loving anybody by doing that.
It's true.
They trammel you. They don't step on you.
Yeah, they do. And it doesn't get better, it gets worse.
Yeah.
That's how you get to the point that you say, like the line, no more. That's it. And then you hold your
ground. That's what holding your ground.
Yep. Don't back down. Not worth it.
And that's kind of a segue into question number 5, isn't it?
One quick one here, though. When I was organizing farmers on a material level, they tried to bribe my sister and myself. But it made me think that the reverse is that, they tried to give us a job and money to bribe us, and I look at the reverse, what happened with Plainfield. Thankfully, when Plainfield was bribed by the Mother Church on losing their status in the journals and the listings of practitioners, they stood to principle. So here we are today having a great time. So I really am thankful for that.
Yeah, well, that's great.
That's
Mike.
right.
We are having a good time.
And that's why you can't have anything that you're, quote, afraid of losing. You know, in movies, they always bring that out when the guy, you know, who the Mel Gibson character, whoever it is, going after the evil guy. The evil guy will try to find some weak point, you know, something. You can't...
That you treasure.
Yeah, that you treasure, yeah. So watch your weak points. And know that you can't lose anything that God has given. Can't. And you see, we weren't afraid. We could have been afraid of losing that. That was just status. It made it. What did it mean? Ultimately, it meant nothing, being listed. But at the time, it seemed very threatening and awful. We wondered, what in the world would we do? But that didn't last for very long. Okay, did we answer? Now we're up to Okay.
Anything more, or shall we go to 5? What role did the donkey play?
I thought it was an ass.
Well, the topic made it a donkey, so that's what I'm going with.
I think donkey is a better term to describe.
Yeah, what was the other name we were going to give it?
You know, I didn't write it down. I should have.
We had another name, but we thought it might be a little too. What's the word? Yeah, right, a little. We might have to bleep it, but.
You can just imagine.
Yeah, you can imagine.
I think that Balaam was the ass.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you. Balaam was the ass. Absolutely.
The donkey was the spiritually minded one at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, I love it.
And Jeremy wrote on the forum, that's malpractice to think they're stubborn and stupid. Just say.
That's a good title, though. Balaam was the ass.
Yeah, we're trying to think. We think if we have these more maybe humorous titles, more people would listen. Anyway, but then there might be some who wouldn't. I don't know. Balaam was the ass. That's a good one, actually. Right, write that one down. That's good. I mean, ass is a legitimate word.
the shoe fits, Larry.
Right.
I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. So.
Oh, right. Well.
So the donkey was the one who got the message right.
And we didn't put in the story how many times the donkey was telling him the truth, and he kept beating the donkey. That's why, and I tell people this, when someone talks to you, maybe perhaps especially your children, listen to them. Before you start beating them up and right away think this, that, or the next thing, listen to what they are saying. Get the spiritual meaning of what they are saying. There probably is truth to it. So that's where there's a lot of rebellion that happens in homes between parents and children. I'll give that as an example. It could be other things. Someone has something to say to you. Listen first. Don't immediately go into attack mode, which is certainly what Balaam did to this ass. You can learn a lot from your children. You can learn a lot if you are quiet and listen and listen to what they're saying. If they're rebelling against something, children are usually pretty smart. There's probably some reason for it. If you listen quietly and ask God to help you really hear what's going on, a practitioner has to do that with a patient. Patient can take all kinds of things, and they're not getting to what's really troubling them. You've got to feel it. So Balaam went into attack mode on this poor donkey.
The interesting thing, the donkey was in listening mode. Didn't do a lot of talking, but got the message and followed it. That's the example.
That's true. It kept turning away, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't listen to Balaam and keep going. It kept turning away.
Because it was listening to the message and got it. Didn't his mouth wasn't busy and moving on doing all kinds of crazy things.
And also, Balaam was mad. He wasn't saying what he wanted the donkey to say, and that can be true too. And in our relationships with other people, if people don't tell you what you want to hear, attack mode. Because you don't want to hear it doesn't mean that you don't need to hear it. Listening is a hugely important quality. If you can't listen, you can't hear God. And he speaks in many ways, including at times through other people.
I think they said the donkey saved his life.
Yeah,
but if he had kept going.
Yes.
Wow.
The sword was drawn.
Right, right. Balaam was in a bad place, and his donkey saved him.
Not only did the donkey listen, but he saw the angel. The angel's there. Why didn't the Balaam see the angel? It was right there.
Come on, buddy.
Couldn't see it. So driven with human will, you couldn't see what was right in front of your face.
That was the lesson for me, actually, in this, was how blinding human will is. Yeah. And that's why you don't feel like you see God or feel God, because you're being blinded by human will. It's a big lesson.
And, it's often associated, blindness and human will are often associated. So if, you have trouble seeing, think about how are you having the bit in your mouth and charging forth. Right. What are you seeing? Watch human will. Because people, and even good people, they get the bit in their mouth and just charge forward with all the good they're going to do. And, doesn't necessarily mean you're trying to be bad with it. Very often it can be good. Or you can be blind to people's faults. You can be living with something that you just don't want to see. You have a blind spot. You don't want to see it. So open your eyes. Open my eyes that I may see. Heavenly messages sent from thee. Open your eyes. Pray that every morning. And if you're having eye problems, pray that. You can see what is truly going on, that you're not putting up defenses and blind spots or rushing blindly ahead. Human will can be sneaky. Sometimes you've done it so long you don't even realize how willful you are.
Amazing. Willfulness is blinding.
It's blinding.
It goes together with what we were saying last week about your eye being single. We all have the ability to perceive light. If our eye is double, it's darkness that we get. We don't see the light. We focus on the cause.
That's it. And that's all this inability and blindness is. That's all it is. It's not in your eyeball, for heaven's sake. It's this. God made you to see, but you have to see as He would see, and you have to slow yourself down and listen to what He's saying, and not go forth madly, stubbornly. Because in the end, it is stubborn. If you're not listening, you're stubborn. So I like that. Balaam was the ass.
And if you're being really timid about dealing with an unprincipled situation, that's also stubborn.
That is.
Isn't it?
Absolutely. That's a good point. All of that, if you keep clinging to that, your timidity, you're clinging to it, then you are being, this is stubborn. If you continue to fear after you've been told over and over and over not to fear, that's stubborn.
I got a definition for stubbornness. It was unyielding. Won't submit.
You know, that the quote, I think it's unity is good. I've given it a lot. It was given to me years ago, but this false sense of substance must yield to his eternal presence and so dissolve. Mrs. Eddy, false sense of substance, false sense of your supply, false sense of your health, false sense of your family relationships, false sense of about anything. It must yield to his eternal presence and so dissolve. And that relates to Linda's definition of unyielding. So if you continually not yield to God, yes, you know, maybe you're going to have trouble with your supply, you're going to find issues with your body, but it can, if you let it yield to God, it will dissolve. Yield to his eternal presence. I love that statement. So you can ask yourself, what false sense of substance do I have that needs to yield to his eternal presence?
What I recognized from this was that in not hearing God and not doing it on several levels, because I always think I have to hear the still small voice, but then the donkey proved that others around you that you have to also get the message from God through horror situations. I mean, how many times have I thought, had a perfect example. Yesterday I was making a drawer, and I had this fleeting thought, well, I'm cutting the shoulder on the two short pieces, and I didn't walk 10 feet to check it out. Sure enough, I cut them on the two short pieces.
Well, those are all learning experiences. So, okay, we have one more question, and it's 11. We can answer it briefly, and then I'm going to go into all of this more tomorrow.
What was the final outcome, and does that teach us anything that may apply to present times?
I never knew the final outcome until more recently. Quite a story, isn't it? It shows where the prophet, no, he wasn't a prophet, whoever he was, Balaam the ass.
The oddball.
The oddball prophet, where his real thought was. So what did he do after all of this?
He was killed.
He was killed, but before then?
He taught the Israelites to be tricked
Yes.
by bringing in women and idols.
Yes, he said, okay, Balak, even though I can't curse the Israelites, we'll have a plan. We'll bring in prostitutes and evil women and get them to sin, and then they will curse themselves. Now that was very wicked, and you see it today too. There are many men who have had downfalls because of that, and some of it's been planned. A wicked woman will go, especially a man prominent in politics or prominent in something, sports, and do just that to bring down his downfall. We have women spies who have done it. So here we had it, and they fell for it, the Israelites. They fell for it, which shows something not so great. That's why you have to have virtue and truth building a strong defense, or it will not go forth as wandering pollen, as Mrs. Eddy says. It's got to be there. And if you don't have it, I don't care, you're going to fall. If it doesn't come one way, it'll come another way to trick you. And this was a stumbling block that in Revelation said, that they blamed Balaam, and he deserved it. He was a wicked man. He might have obeyed God and not cursing them, but he was still out to do wrong. Okay, so what happens then? They have a big orgy, evidently.
And they end up being destroyed. I think they killed at least 26,000 or something of the Israelites. I think it was leaders within Israel that this has to be out and gotten rid of and destroyed.
Yes. Many, many were killed. In fact, some people have said that's the beginning of a venereal disease or something. But anyway, they were destroyed. And then a righteous man, Phineas, I believe his name was. I keep trying to get him in a Bible story, but it's almost impossible. He goes and spears a couple that are committing adultery or something, and because of that, many of the Israelites are saved because God was pleased with that action. So, end of story.
Actually, I wanted to say quick was that I researched the plague because I was wondering what it was, and then it occurred to me, because I couldn't find a specific thing, that the plague actually was the immorality that brought him down and separating the Israelites from God. So that was the big enough plague.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was the plague and the immorality, yes. So we will get into more of this tomorrow. This is the groundwork in many ways. I think we had a light group today. We've got Shardy and Linda here, and many others are coming tomorrow to church. And if any of you are close by or would like to join us tomorrow, that would be great. It's going to be a wonderful gathering of people.
Plenty of seats.
Yeah, plenty of seats in church. We'd love to see you. So some of you are en route today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And the rest of you, we look forward to seeing you by teleconference or computer. And thank you very much, Mike, for a great class. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We still need some
Thank you.
Oh, we need some
Great, thank you.
We need some volunteers for June. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.